Hi, this is Open Stutter. My name is Mark, and I'm joined by a friend of mine, Chris Anderson. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Mark. Um, Thanks for having me on. I'm Chris. I'm a aspiring author and a person who stutters. Known Mark for a while now, and I'm excited to have a conversation.
Yes. So, Chris, when we started this project, you were one of the first people that came to my mind about who I would love to have a conversation with. So I'm really glad this is happening, and thanks for taking the time for this.
Of course. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And then I got even more excited when we were talking about this conversation, and you mentioned that you've completed your manuscript for a book that you're writing, or it seems like it's already mostly written. So you sent me that recently, and I've had a chance to look through it, and I'm really stoked to read the entire thing. Um, anyway, I wonder if you want to talk about the book, your book, and what compelled you to write the book.
Yeah. So I started to write probably about the time I started avoidance reduction therapy. Um, so that was probably about 8-ish years ago. But I wasn't a good writer. It was awful. It was just long paragraphs and just all the thoughts that I wanted to say, but they weren't organized in that. So I stopped for a few years because I realized I didn't have all the story yet. It hadn't ended, I guess. But I wanted to write. It was like an urgency that I wanted to share with others who stutter, and all of those who help us or seek to help us. I just didn't know how. I didn't know the process of how to write a book, um, but I like to read. So um, after a few years and I experienced a lot of things in my life, I had a new life. I had a lot to write about, more to write about than I had when I started. So I started to handwrite in a notebook every day for a year. I wrote out the stories of my life, all the experiences I had with my speech, or um, everything associated with my childhood, up till I was about 28, I think, or something like that. Um, and after I hand wrote all that, typed it out, I was like, all right, maybe I have a story here to share. And then as that was happening, I left avoidance reduction therapy officially. I mean, I didn't leave. I'm still like part of the community, but um, I had to leave because of the demands at work. I just had way too much to do and not enough time outside of work. But at that point, I realized I was nearing the end of what I've come to learn as enough. Like, I don't have to try as hard, to work as hard, to speak, or the reactivity to my stuttering isn't there anymore. And it kind of happened all of a sudden almost. But I still stuttered and all of that, but I was happy. I didn't have the stress that I usually had to speak. So at that point, I really started to work on the book, turned it into stories, into more adapters and all of that. And for 2 whole years, I spent at least an hour in the morning writing about stuttering. That is not healthy. I can tell you that much, but it really turned into an urgency to write and to share this, because I think it could have an impact on others, and maybe even, as I say in the book, like accelerate their journey to the end of stuttering. Because I think it really doesn't have to be as long as it was for me. And that may sound a little overconfident, or like not attainable for some, but like, I'm just the average person who stutters. Like, that put in a lot of work and took a lot of time to look at the road that I took, and I'm excited to share the story, and how I got to my end of stuttering.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to read it. I'm curious about the process of writing, like, every day for a couple years. If something sticks out as like particularly challenging, or particularly, I don't know, just like something like surprising about that process, or
As I said, it's extremely unhealthy, because like, I have a day job, but like, the writing was all I thought about. It was like, how could I explain the experience of stuttering in a way that is easy enough for people who don't stutter to understand it, but also to help those who do. Like, I was like in the weeds on like example is like understanding like the approach to like a moment of stuttering. Like, I wrote out every instance or this decision in my head, or hesitation, or feelings afterwards that happen, that have had a huge impact on me, like the reactivity. I go into that in a lot of detail, because I think that that's an area that hasn't been explored enough yet. And I think like being able to write it out on paper, like actually handwrite it, like makes you slow down a bit and realize that like there is a lot there that we experience that we don't even know. Like I didn't even know like a lot of the things that a lot of emotions that I went through them without even realizing it. Like everything that happens when you're afraid is like amplified almost. So you really experience it, but until you take the time to like slow it down and experience it like on the page, like it really impacts you. But it also helps you to see like what you have to work towards, like the reactivity that isn't really there at all from others, or like also like understanding that when you repetitively experience moments of stuttering, those are experienced as like almost like traumatic memories, and that you have a like really clear understanding of what you think happens, or what actually happened, or what may have happened. And I think like experiencing those over the years and over, I've been left with like a memory that I remember everything. Like I remembered a lot of things that I thought I forgot, and I was able to write about them as if they happened last week. Like I'm not sure if we'll get into it, but I went to a intensive clinic when I was 13. I remember it like as if it just happened, and that was over 20 years ago now, but it had a huge impact on my life. So I think the thing that surprised me the most is the clarity with which I could remember either major experiences or even like what I experienced in individual moments of stuttering, especially when I wrote them out. Yeah.
Yeah. You talk about the process of healing from the wounds that the affliction of stuttering has caused. And I love your choice of words. Like, I think a lot of folks think about like the end road from stuttering therapy, they might use other words like recovery, for example. And
Exactly.
you made a conscious decision to use the word healing instead. I would love for you to share your reasons behind that, and also I'm curious about if the process of you writing, if that contributed toward the healing process.
Yeah. So that was intentional. Um, I never really felt right about the word recovery and stuttering because I started to stutter at around the age of 6, and I don't have a memory of what it was like to not stutter. Um, so how can I recover back to that state of not knowing? I know it's not exactly right, but it's how I feel. And also like um, healing like hit the nail on the head for me, because like we carry all of those wounds or experiences, and to me they just haunted me, or they like inflicted a like a lasting impact, and like you just pull them along with you through the years, and they just add up and add up. And I had this analogy of like throwing them over a wall, and they just kept piling up, and like they were always there. And like um the way I worked through them, um or I have worked through them, is through the writing, but also through experiencing um, the same things that created the wounds, or like that, like things that I avoided, or like all the shame that surrounded them. Um, just like almost like having to re-experience them to put them to rest, or explain them, how they actually happened, because a huge part of stuttering is like our whole experience is like influenced by like a lens almost that's uh, obscured by stuttering, in that like everything that we see is like has to do with stuttering, or the experience that we have is like influenced by it, and like that isn't how it actually is. So like, or how it actually happens. So like understanding that and being able to write it out and rewrite new stories of how the wounds actually influence who you are now, like that was huge for me. And it helped me understand that, like, you know, I've been through a lot, but like it made me who I am. And like um yeah, like being able to write that with an open mind, like about it all, like that really helped me a lot. Uh, and I write a lot about that in the book.
Awesome. Yeah. A word that comes to mind when you're saying wounds is trauma. Uh,
Yeah.
I can certainly relate to that. I've considered stuttering to be a traumatic experience in my life, and like you said, a lot of little traumatic experience stacked on top of each other.
Yeah, let's explore that a little bit, because like that's a huge part of the book, in understanding like the whole experience of stuttering, and it actually excites me a lot because, when I realized like that's exactly what the experience was how I came up with every waking moment, because like stuttering was my every waking moment, like for years and years and years. And the reason it was that way is because every time I opened my mouth to speak, it was a traumatic experience. Um, and I cannot overemphasize that, because overemphasize it enough, because as those add up, as you say, like every every experience just piles on top of the next, and you grow up under that conditioning. Like you become what you do or experience, and it was like inescapable almost. Like every time I spoke, like there were hesitations, and I didn't want to say this word or that word, or I was afraid, or like for me, the traumatic impact was always afterwards, because a lot of times I would just black out, and I would just like almost like fly away almost, and like wake up when it was over. And then I'd have to deal with like the headaches from the effort to speak, um, the exhaustion, the I wouldn't be able to do anything for hours afterwards, like on a regular basis. Like that is really unhealthy. Like I I have a smile on my face, because like I can't believe that like I lived that way for that long. Um, but like that plays into like how how do you escape that? It was always like this like eh, almost like an endless wonder of like how does it end? How does that traumatic state end? Like it was inescapable, and like a huge part of what I wrote about is like is that how like how I was able to do that, like limit the or decrease the reactivity in the moments of stuttering to a place where, um, I can walk in to a room or to a social situation, and know that I'll be all right, like, and I won't have to experience a traumatic situation, or to have to resolve any of the after effects of stuttering. That's the freeing part of like being able to work through that. It's like it took a while, but as I worked through it and began to understand like how the process of healing worked, like I began to not put all the pressure on myself to to work so hard to understand it even. Yeah, I'd be interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts, honestly, on like a lot of things. Yeah, one thing you wrote in your introduction is that you felt compelled to answer the call to illuminate a path out of affliction and to tease out lessons from my journey that may help others activate and reinforce change in their lives. And I think that's great that like you sort of that is your motivation is sort of to like try and help others essentially who are experiencing the burdens that stuttering can inflict.
Yeah, that's the part that is the urgency in this. As I wrote in the introduction, I said, "This is the book I needed as a child and as an adult to find my way out." That's a strong comment to make, but I really believe that, and I know there are a lot of people out there that are helping people who stutter, but I think we can reach a lot more people if we're all on the same page. And I think a lot of us, I mean, I'm talking like I'm an SLP or something, but I'm not. But I have other interests after this that I think will help that. But I really wrote this in a way that it could be like a how-to, almost like a how-to overcome affliction. I use overcome there on purpose because like the effort is to overcome the affliction in order to live with stuttering, not to overcome the actual act of stuttering. And in the book, there is the whole third part is meant to be like an analysis of all the steps that I took that I think are applicable to others. Understanding that each person's experience is their own and everyone's isn't the same, but I think there are enough similarities between us that we're able to share like the best practices or things that helped us the most in a way that are useful to others. Yeah.
Yeah, I have no doubt there's lots of wisdom in this book. I've only read a small amount and like I was already um yeah, in
Cool.
like with in a lot of ways. Yeah. Um Another thing, I'm wondering what you think about how much of the trauma of the lived experience of stuttering is attributed to societal stigma of stuttering. Just like a lack of awareness and understanding.
Yeah, I kind of have a alternative perspective on that. I understand the stigma, but I think we could do a lot better job at kind of helping our own before we help others understand us in the sense of like we who stutter. I don't think there's been enough of an effort amongst us to help each other to mentor, to share stories, to help that I've observed. At least I know the NSA, all those organizations are awesome, and they have done a lot for me, for everyone that has attended the events or the meetings and stuff. But I think there's a sweet spot in between all of that where there needs to be more intersections between we who stutter that enable us to reach the people who need help the most. Like, I don't think there's enough of an emphasis on that. Whereas like there is a lot of emphasis on trying to get people to understand what we experience. Like I feel real strongly about that. Like we want others to understand like that they need to hear us out. We need to have accommodations and all that stuff. But in my own experience, that was what held me back in a lot of ways. Like my kind of like my identity or like my perceptions of how others understood stuttering like drove a lot of the affliction almost, like what I thought about, like in the moments, like each moment, like it'd be like, are they looking at me weird? Like, what do they think about me? Like, or like even on the phone, like, what am I going to say when they say the phone's breaking up, or like I don't want to have to explain it every time, like, or to have to, there's a way to spread awareness like that is constructive. And then like a lot of times I see it as like we are, myself included, we want people to understand, but like they have their own things that they're worrying about. Like they have their own interests. Like we're such a small part of the world's population that like not everyone can be heard. But at the same time, I think in helping each other, that will go a lot further to presenting like a strong opposition to the stigma, because like we need to have confident voices out there at the forefront, or like out there showing people that like it really is okay to stutter. Like I show everybody I can every day that I'm able that I stutter, and it has almost no impact on me anymore. I think that in itself is a way to do it that isn't like eliciting anything from anyone, or like that, like we don't have to reach out to people to make them understand. Um, I know this is a little bit of a stronger position on it, but um, I really think that we need to reach the people who need help before we spend all the effort to reach out to others to understand us, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's an interesting uh, consideration because on one hand, the reason we need help is due to the oppression from non-people who stutter and society at large.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely understand that. I just think that part of that is what held me back. Um, I mean, I'm not saying like we should stop spreading awareness, but I think there's a happy medium there where there should be an equal effort to pull others alongside of us and show that, like, you know, it is possible to 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 leave the affliction behind, to like be confident speaker. um, to me, that in itself is a strong message that um, a lot of people hear and see, um, at least in my life.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think both things are equally as important, right? I mean, you got to help yourself and help others, and then, and also, work to change the structures that led to the trauma and continue to and continue to lead to trauma for people who stutter.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
you mentioned part of that mindset held you back. I'm curious what you mean by that.
And in the in, entire experience of stuttering, I think the hardest thing to do, or to learn to do, is to reveal to people that you are a person who stutters. And for almost all of my life, that was what I did, um, to opt out of my life, like to avoid things. Um, there's a part, that I talk about, this, like the pitch. It was the pitch I used in school to opt out of all class participation, and that evolved through college, that like I avoided letting other people see and hear me as a person who stutters, and that held me back. Like I didn't experience anything. I just, every single new class, or um, even in like interviews or the like I would just explain like, hey, I'm a person who stutters. Um, I don't want to talk in class, or I don't want to do a presentation, or the reason I walked to your office instead of making a call is because I have a hard time on the phone. Or like being able to reveal your biggest flaw to somebody is one of the hardest things for anyone to do. and especially hard when you can't get the words out, or the words that you want to use are not there for you to use. Um, and that opting out is like the metaphor of my life for most of my life. Like that is what perpetuates my stigma, is that like I didn't learn how to face it till I was almost in my 30s. Um, and that's a long time to have to do that. And that's part of the reason that like if I wasn't able to do that, I would still be stuck. Um, and I talk about in the book how the pitch that I gave to opt out evolved into the way I began to opt in to my life. Like the pitch became a story that I used to connect with people. And I see that a lot in the people I've met at the NSA, or in stories I read online, or from other people who stutter. Like it's actually like a conversation starter instead of ender. Like nobody hardly ever has anything as interesting as the experience of stuttering to talk about. Like it's really interesting when you get down in the weeds and you think of how it works and how it influences like all your actions and thoughts and stuff. And like that the ability to tell someone that you stutter, having that opens everything up. Like it allows you to like show the confidence that you have in yourself, or to like explain who you are, or the reason that you are the way you are. It's like that's almost like the part about addressing the stigma. It's almost like indirectly addressing it, in that like you show it instead of like having to announce every time that you're a person who stutters and it takes you longer to say something. Just be patient. Like it's from how I've experienced it, it's like people will listen to you even if you don't advertise or or the like they are compassionate. And at the same time, the major thing that I learned was that the outliers are the ones who don't. And I never ever believed that was the case. Like I was always on edge, almost like waiting for people to say something about my speech, and it really didn't happen that often, other than like a few really impactful moments in my life. But outside of that, like having all the times when they didn't, like those experiences are the ones that kind of overwhelmed the affliction part of stuttering. That helped me a lot, and to understand the stigma and how to approach it.
Yeah. No, that's good stuff. It sounds like you're saying from by healing from the self stigma, you're also um, reducing societal stigma from simply living your life as somebody who stutters proudly.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like the example that I always use is that, like, I used to be the guy on the sidelines who would have to whisper to other people to speak for me, and now, like, all of a sudden I have a seat at the table. I'm leading the conversations. I'm confidently stuttering, and people accept that. Like, they see it and me as a contributor to the conversation, or a situation. Like that's a huge shift in perspective and the experience. So yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's about moving from defects to difference. Like
Yeah,
we stuttered and we still have valuable things to say.
yeah,
That
yeah,
doesn't change the content of
exactly.
what we're saying.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, it's really a shame that we live in a world that there is all this stigma around stuttering, and that results in a lot of traumas occurring, and
mm-hmm.
that resulted in you and lots of other children who stutter considering stuttering to be the biggest flaw in their lives, right?
Yeah,
And something that you touched on earlier that I would like to um, uh, discuss is your experience in the fluency clinic when you were 13,
mm-hmm.
um, and reading the note that the clinic sent to your mother. um, just like really made me feel a certain type of way, and I'm wondering if I can share some of that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Okay. So these are quotes from a progress report. He benefits from the use of earplugs when drilling to help increase his awareness of tension in the laryngeal area. The tension interferes with his ability to produce smooth speech. Chris has voiced his determination to practice his tools in the morning before he goes to school. It is recommended that Chris continue to receive speech therapy a minimum of 60 minutes per week. And it is important that he work with a therapist familiar with the tools taught at the, should I say the name of the clinic?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, it's not open anymore. So
at the Starbucks clinic. They're like, just reading that infuriated me.
yeah, yeah. I have all the notes, as you can see. Like, I have, that's the part of this, is like my mom had a folder with all the reports and the scores, the the tally marks of how many times I blocked or stuttered, like all the way through college, or like when I stopped in college. Like I have all those, and like the records that and the memories that I have of that, it just like they were really impactful to write about. Like it took me back. Like prior to that, at the outset of the chapter, there's a when I arrived at the clinic, there was like a you went to like a introduction or like testing. It was in like a audiology chamber almost, and it was almost like a execution style chamber, in that there was a chair on top of a podium with like a step up, and then there was a tripod that had a camera. And like I have dreams about this, like not all the time anymore, but I used to, of like being on the chair and watching the camera as the light on top of it flashed on. I had a block in the beginning of it that was like the longest block anyone had ever observed at the clinic. And like I completely blacked out. Like I just went somewhere else and like try not to experience it. But like at the same time, I have the memory because we had to watch the videos later on in the clinic, to like examine like our pattern, to see how bad it was, to show the progress. Like that's the trauma that I live with. Like that like I explained that like you don't forget that stuff. Like I was only 13 years old at that point, but I remember it like as if it just happened. And it is one of the most impactful moments in my life that I experienced. And it doesn't have to be that way. Like I know those aren't happening as often, but they are still, and there are people experiencing that. But part of the effort to write is to explain that, to in the hope that people will read it and say, huh, maybe this isn't what I should be doing, or man, that's going to impact him when he grows up. Like that's 20 years ago at this point, and we're talking about it today as if it just happened. Like that, if there ever was like an example of how much the lived experience impacts you, like for me that's it. Like there isn't any other moment in my life than that time on the chair in front of the spotlight, just blocking away and my mind taking over to protect me. Like that's what you have to work towards overcoming, not the way that you talk. Like that's the hard part. Like I can live with a stutter. I can't live with that the way I lived it.
Yeah, man, it's heavy stuff, honestly. It's like your reaction is understandable when they treat us like lab mice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like Nadia and I, there's actually a couple other things in the report that I wanted to just like some of the stuff. Like Chris demonstrates a limited understanding of the motor and monitoring tools. He is able to use speech, breathing, gentle onset, and slow speech when drilling, and is beginning to transfer tool usage to structured speaking situations. And then they gaslight you here when they say Chris's willingness to accept feedback from clinicians was inconsistent. When clinic began, Chris was very open to receiving constructive feedback regarding his performance. As his speech improved, he sometimes evidenced annoyance when corrected and asked to repeat phrases during speech work. This opposition may be tied to negative self-talk. Like what? That blew my mind. It's like, no, it's tied to you trying to like control this person in a type of way that every single thing he says is like said in a way that you approve of.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure if you'll get into the next part, but that brings up a good point about another part of the experience is that like being frustrated as often as I was like made me angry. Like I was extremely angry as a child. I had like hyper ventilation spats. I was annoyed or expressed annoyance at times. Like that's where that originated. And
Understandably so, from how others are responding to
yeah,
the way that you're trying to communicate, right?
yeah, but like that like is a thread through my life experience in that like that's what I'm working on at this point, like the anger or like the reactivity to things um, is not from the way I talk. It's just the inability to express emotions in the way I wanted to at that time. Like that moves along all through your life and influences how you develop as like a person, I guess. Like and I see the remnants of that now, like the way I react to things or like how watchful or observant I am of my environment or like other people or um, like at times I'm quick to temper or like that reactivity is a result of those early experiences. Like there isn't a doubt in my mind about that. Like we learn through our experiences, and I know I'm shaped by all of them, not just a few. Like everything I experience made me who I am, even if they aren't the best qualities or characteristics or whatever you want to call them. Like they've influenced who I've become, and it's started at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, it's Nadia and I were talking the other day, and just on how it's really cruel and wrong that when a child who's experienced a lot of trauma from trying to hide a part of them so they can conform to the rest of society and how they communicate. And then when they reach a point that they really, really need help outside of themselves and they seek help from a speech language therapist, or the speech, even maybe it isn't even their own choice, that's somebody requires that they see a speech language therapist, and that speech therapist actually, through their work with those individuals, actually instill even more trauma. They traumatize the person even more, right? And saying like, oh, let me actually show you how you can conform or try to conform even better. And it's just like such a shame. And I really think things need to change in um, how speech therapists view stuttering and how they treat stuttering.
Yeah. Yeah. And I agree with all of that. And however, I will say, in defense of the speech therapist that I had, and I write about this at the end in the last part, like that I never really understood what their role actually was, in that they were just there as one of my closest points of connection, in that like they heard me out, they were there to talk to me, they wanted to help, they were willing to help. It's just they didn't have the right experience or the right approach.
They didn't know how. They unintentionally
Yeah.
more harm, I think. Or would you say that's true, that like your experience in speech therapy up until you started working with Vivian, that those experiences were traumatizing, or were they healing in a way?
They were only healing in the way that, for the hour or the half an hour that I had with them each week or each time, I really believe that they were like a bridge to get me to eventually where I needed to be. In that, like, I I I I was a loner. I isolated myself all through school. Like, I had friends, but like, I mean, you know the experience. Like, as often as you want to be with other people, you have a stronger um, desire to avoid everybody. And I think, like, at that level, or on that level, like, I had connections with all my speech therapists in a way that, like, they were there to listen, they were there to want to help. And I really believe that that was enough. like like yeah, they didn't help me as much, or they weren't able to, but I eventually got to where I needed to be, in the right place at the right time. um,
I in my experience, it wasn't enough, because the speech therapist, it's like I'm I'm having a hard time conforming and speaking like
yeah.
speakers.
No, I definitely agree with that. I definitely agree. It's just like, when you're thinking about healing, you can't help that. Like that's like that already happened. And like, you
Yeah.
really have to get to a place where like the story is constructive almost. Like there has to be part of the experience that allowed you to make it through. Like there was a point, and I'm sure you'll read it. It's in chapter 2. It's called It. It is a word that I can never bring myself to say until I wrote it. I don't want to give it all away, but if you can imagine like the worst case scenario of the whole experience, that was probably it. It is the reason I called it that. It was what I thought was the bottom. But as I say at the end, there were always people there that moved me along enough to get me to where I eventually ended up. And I think when you talk about change over a lifetime, you really need to find the bridges between the trauma. In that, like, it really sucks, like the whole experience, but like there were people there for me at every step of the way. Every step. Like I was not alone. I was not the only person who stuttered. I had a family who supported me, who did everything they could to find me help, even if it wasn't the right help. The intentions were there to help me, and I really believe that is how I ended up where I am now. And part of that were the speech therapists who just sat there with me for a half an hour, even if it wasn't doing the right things. Like on that side of it, even though there was the trauma of all of the efforts to fix the stuttering, there was, at the end of the story, there was these through life connections that allowed me to make it to my end.
Mm. Yeah. I just wish that like my experiences in speech therapy, and I think a lot of other folks like the speech therapist, like I'm looking forward to living in a world that like speech therapists who treat stuttering like really do help people who stutter get like heal from these traumas and like get back to themselves and who they really are, instead of like trying to pull them away from themselves by reinforcing fluency and enhancing strategies.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I think
yeah.
I think like you and the others who are out there approaching it that way, we're gonna get there. Like we just, I think, have to move a little faster. We need to pull together to get that train moving, and I think it will happen. But we really need to reach each other to do that.
Yeah. Yes, there needs to be a lot of work done within the stuttering community and
mm-hmm.
society, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, also, quick shout out to Vivian Siskin. I read in the book that was the first time, I think, when you met her the first time, she asked you, Chris, has anyone ever told you it's okay to stutter? How old were you when that happened, and what was that like? How did you respond to that?
So that was when I was 27. I'm now 35, and that is also the time that I first thought about that when she asked me that. I know a lot of others have that exact same experience in our group, but that doesn't make it any less impactful, because I never thought about it. Like, no one ever said that. No one was like, all right, maybe you have a block here and there, or you have a hard time here, but whatever. Like, there are good days and there are bad days, as she always explains. Like, but when you think about it and you write that out, like I took notes like no other in those early times, and like a lot of that helped me remember those impactful moments like that. Um, like it almost leaves me like without words, because like it like changed my whole approach to life. Like like it was almost immediately that I put it to use. Like I put those words to use, and like if she were here, she said she would often tell me that I raced too far ahead on that part of the therapy, like the cognitive part of it. But I eventually came back and brought the other half up, and as I explained in the book, like I'm now at the point where like I know that I have to open stutter, um, at all times. Like I have to, in order to keep moving forward. It's the effort at this point to make that automatic. Like I know, like the act of knowing that I have to do it is a huge step, and that I do it a lot now. It's just I have to do it automatically, and that's part of the habit change that I have left to work on. And it was from that moment when she said those words that like just shook me up, and like I woke up like it was amazing. And that's part of the reason I opened the introduction with that line,
And
because it was that impactful.
yeah, it truly is okay to stutter.
Yeah, it
Yeah.
really is. Yeah, like it's unbelievable what happens when you do.
So, Chris, you talk about the four propellers of change: awareness, action, perspective, and connection, and how they grew within your efforts to change. And you wrote, it was only when my life suddenly opened up, did I realize that the momentum from the propellers coalesced to banish stuttering to the background, no longer the arbiter of my past, present, or future. It felt like change suddenly happened all at once and was lasting. Um, so I'm really excited to read more about your personal process of change. I'm curious if you want to share some a message to people who stutter, who are looking to heal and change as you have.
It's actually one of the first words that you said there is to me the answer. Like momentum. How do you build momentum in your life? Like this isn't a bash to therapy or anything like that, but it is not the only way that you heal. What I meant by that part that you read is we have to look to every part of our life to build momentum, and within each part you change, and those parts add up to take you where you end up. And what I mean by that is while in therapy, I was also growing a new relationship with my now wife. I was starting a new job that had a lot of high feared opportunities every single day. I was becoming an Ironman, learning how to swim and all of that. The training it took and how that impacted my self confidence. Then in my family, when I got married again, which is part of the story, and then also in therapy. Like if you think about healing in the center and all of those parts of my life around the edge, all that momentum comes together and just it seems like change happened all at once, but it really happened day by day, with the actions I took, all the times I chose not to avoid, all the times I stuttered, all the workouts I did, the dates that I went on that I was really afraid of. Like this a joke that we have now is that like my wife was really intimidating. And I talk about it in the book that like I just tried to make it to the next date. Like that's all I did, and it was extremely hard because I wasn't in therapy at that point yet. But I gained a lot of confidence from those, and that carried me into the Ironman and all that. Came with that whole experience, and that propelled me at work. Like it's easy to see afterwards, but as you're in it and experiencing it, it's extremely hard to see, like to understand how the momentum builds behind you to just move you along, in a way that like when I got to my end, that it was because of all of that. Like it wasn't only the therapy I was in, the assignments I did. It was everything. Like my choice to to do all that. That's what is meant by taking my life back. Like I never had my life until I started to live it. Like, and then I found out what happened when I did. Like all those awesome, amazing, unbelievable things began to happen until they never stopped happening. That seems like hard to believe in and of itself, but when you get there, you know, like okay, I can ease off the gas a little bit. I don't have to always be at like a breakneck pace to heal or to overcome affliction or to try so hard in my assignments. Like there's a point that you get to that it's just like enough. Like I have a good life. I'm doing everything I want to be doing and more. Like that I never believed possible. Like, and that's what at that point was when the urgency to write like really hit me. Like when I realized all of that, like how it worked, like how stuttering ends. Like I longed to know that answer my whole life, and it just kind of happened. And I wish I knew that it worked out that way as I attempted to answer it my whole life. Like if I knew that I could get to where I am now, and I was in that audiology chamber, like just blacking out, like it never would have been as hard as it was. But you know, it is what it is, and I really hope with everything that I have and have put into this that it will shorten the pursuit of another person's end. Like they're able to get there a little faster or a little easier than they would have had I not written this. And I really, really felt obligated to write it. Like it was just really strong, a strong urgency to write. And I hope others are able to use it.
Chris, I appreciate you a lot. Appreciate those efforts as somebody who stutters and somebody who's a professional working in the community. I'm certainly appreciative, and I'm certain that like it's going to help a lot of people. So thank you for sharing your story, for trusting me with your story. When is it? When are you hoping to get the book out?
ASAP. I'm learning the process as I go. As I said, I have a full-time job as a writer, and I'm a new father, so I'm moving along as fast as able. But I'm a lot closer than I thought I would be at this point. So I'm probably like halfway through the marathon at this point, I would bet.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I'm looking forward to reading it. Also, we'll have to have another conversation once it's out, and
Yeah,
I've read it. And,
yeah,
yeah, I'm
love to.
for that.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to share a little bit about it, and for all your excellent questions. I really enjoyed this.